the drums pulsating, the energy so strong. Join the movement where dreams belong. From Lagos to Nairobi, hear the call. Skillweed Academy, break down the walls. In the heart of Africa, a flame ignites, a rhythm so vibrant, it sets minds alight. Skillweed Academy, where leaders are born. Embrace the tempo, let your dreams take storm. Rise up, leaders, let the beat guide your way. Unlock your potential, seize the day. From the dance floor to the boardroom, let your light shine, shine. Skillweed Academy, it's your time. Feel the drums pulsating, the energy so strong. Join the movement where dreams belong. From Lagos to Nairobi, hear the call. Skillweed Academy, break down the walls. Rise up, leaders, let the beat guide your way. Unlock your potential, seize the day. From the dance floor to the boardroom, let your light shine, shine. Skillweed Academy, it's your time. Oh, 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 Feel the drums pulsating, the energy so strong. Join the movement where dreams belong. From Lagos to Nairobi, hear the call. Skillweed Academy, break down the walls. In the heart of Africa, a flame ignites, a rhythm so vibrant, it sets minds alight.
Okay, without much further ado, it's a delight to be here. Thank you all for taking the time to join us today. It's midday in the US Central Time, and I'm excited today to have a great mentor on board to speak with us. It's going to be an exciting one, really. A little profile about this great person that is speaking with us. He and I used to work together in a global consulting firm. Then I was the head of delivery of operation technology. And we've had some war stories together, exciting times together, crisis management together, a lot of craziness together, really, in that space. So without much ado, let's bring up stage Mr. Brett Young in the house. Hey,
Thank you. Thank you, Akeem.
I'm sounding like
Hello.
one of the
Hey, you're the
how are you?
DJ. You're the MC.
I'm the MC now, you
Impresario.
know.
Yeah. It's good to
Oh
meet
man. So
everybody.
hi Brett. So Brett, before we get started, our community like to know our folks. So, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about you, your story, all your experience in the past, especially around operation technology and all the exciting things you've done in the past. So if you don't mind, just give us some insight into your story.
Okay, thank you. Keen, I appreciate all your confidence. You always make me feel good about myself, which is what every great boss should do, right? But I started out I started working young, but I was in an oil refinery, I suppose, first as construction and then later on as maintenance and operator and that sort of thing. So I did a lot of that work until I realized that the value that the individual employee uh, brought in was continually, what I want to say, was depreciating over time. A lot of that had to do with automation.
Hmm.
So as we became, out in the field where they have the pumping units and also in the plant, increasingly dependent on automation. And so I took an interest in kind of swapping careers, but the career swap wasn't as direct. First, I went into IT, did a lot of that for 6 or 8 years. And then one day, somebody came along and said, "Hey, you know a little bit about oil and gas, don't you?" And I said, "Yes, unfortunately." And they said, "We got a project for you." So after that, it was one thing after another, and it's been 40 years, different employers
Amazing.
working, yeah, working on different types of uh, of solutioning largely of
Yes.
around automation.
Amazing.
So
So
a little bit of
if
an
I
accident.
no, I
What's
said
that?
if I was to ask you, Brett, that where
Yeah.
do you see, and I know you get into all the details in a bit, but just for the purpose of our community, why do you think it's important to put an eye on, critical infrastructure in general? Because most people are focused on mostly the enterprise IT, 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 IT. For those of us that have background in operation technology, why do you think it's important, to also be very intentional about OT?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. It's been a sleeper for a long time. Some of the plants that we go into haven't really had any major technology refresh in 40 or 50 years.
Yeah.
So you've got, on the one hand, you've got um, operators who are way behind in terms of their tech deficit, both acquiring the different types of technology, understanding those technologies, and also protecting those technologies. So you've got I've been in manufacturing plants before where there's not a stick of anything there that's not 50 years old.
Mm,
So you have that on the one hand. On the other hand, you have the drive to use third party services. As an example, people outside of our plant. You've got the drive to use different types of after production services around sales and marketing, around billing. You have all of these things now becoming increasingly sophisticated, and they're still attached to the old plant. The problem is in this age of, say, ransomware attacks,
yeah.
they don't have very good defenses. And now we're talking about things that are important to us.
Perfect. And this is a good segue to hand it over to you folks. Let's
Okay.
enjoy this presentation. This is the best the world has to offer. Really, Brett is very experienced and deep. We worked with some of the best top 50 clients globally, and there's so much to learn from him. So, over to you, Brett. If you're ready to share, and I would just make take it away.
Okay. Are there any questions before we jump off?
We just reserve that towards the end.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Let's see. Tell me when I get this right. There we go.
Here we go. All right. Now
Yeah, a little
you
bit of a mess,
yep,
but
yep.
let's see.
Here we go. All
That's the
right.
very end of the show.
All right. I'm gonna step away,
I
Brett.
just
Your show.
I just gave away the ending.
Okay, got
So
it.
just wanted to take a little look at kind of what the basis is for OT cybersecurity, as well as what are the current issues. And the current issues are getting a lot closer to home, and we'll see that here in just a minute. So, first of all, what do we mean by OT? OT was coined not too long ago to mean, in my mind, everything that's not IT that also involves computers. So, OT we use very loosely to mean those operational systems that control um, real stuff. In fact, it's also called uh, cyber physical systems. What we call OT is also called cyber physical systems, indicating on the one hand that there's something there tangible, like you can see the rail lines in the control center here, and on top of that, another layer of communications, data storing, that sort of thing that would require cybersecurity attention. This is pretty interesting. This is a what do they call it? Cross track somewhere in Chicago. But I would point out one thing that it's probably 100 years old since it's been here. But I would point out one thing. There's a house that sits above the rails that used to be full of people. There's a little air conditioner there too for a hot day. It used to be full of people. Nowadays, there's not that many people uh, directly controlling. an operation like this. So the risk on this one's pretty obvious. If you have trains headed towards an intersection and there's nothing to control them, you've got the potential for pretty horrendous, disaster. But now most of it's done through automation, and some of the automation is just amazing. I'll give you just one. There's millions of miles of rail line in the world, and those rails can split. So one of the things one of the technologies that have been brought forth is a tone generator that sends sound down the rail line. And then if it encounters an area where there's a break or a split or something's gone wrong that way, it'll send back a signal to some kind of automated function somewhere. They would have all of the trains slow their speed down, from 40 or 50 miles per hour to 5 miles per hour. And that's kind of like a yellow light, if you will, as opposed to a green light or a red light. Well, consequently, it's popular among some people hacking the rail lines to introduce what do I want to say, illegal or aberrant signal that messes up the original signal in the rail. And so nobody knows where it's coming from. And so what they do is slow all the rail traffic in a large geographic area on account of that. So it's a denial of service or loss of service, if you will. And it's all based on the fact that we don't have so many people watching the trains. We're going to depend on automation. Yeah, this is just a picture that gives a kind of a wide view, which I'll explain better in just a second, but a wide view of automated technologies in various sectors that all depend on pretty much the same schema for automation. And with that, going clockwise, you've got wind farms, you've got that's supposed to be, I guess, a gasoline or natural gas refinery. You've got large water treatment facilities, not just for cities, but also for industrial uses. You've got on the lower right-hand side, you can see this is one of the companies we actually worked with, Keen and I, but where they build these large engines and are very much dependent on automated process. Whereas in the old days, it was engineering drawings and guys with screwdrivers. A lot of that's been done now with robotics. Soda pop manufacturer just finished up a project actually with Coke in terms of securing their enterprise. Their problem, ransomware attacks. A ransomware attack would cost I don't know how many millions of dollars for a single day, but it's just devastating to the bottom line in an industry where the profit margins are pretty thin. You've got rail, I just mentioned, and here's an offshore platform on the lower left-hand side. And, offshore used to be a lot more expensive to run until they started eliminating the humans. So there's a lot less people onshore, which is a pretty big expense. But now we're a lot more dependent on automated systems and redundant automated systems and remote viewing, remote sensing, that sort of thing than we have been in the past. So that's kind of the round robin of industries that are directly affected by OT security. So I want to talk for just an instant about SCADA systems. You also often see DCS or distributed computing systems. But if you'll see, there's all kinds of little boxes around this rail switching yard. And what they have to do, two things. One is that they have to operate independently. In other words, without any other type of communication to the outside world. That little box, that little switching box, needs to be able to do its job safely. And at the same time, you have an imperative that all of those little boxes need to communicate back to the headquarters. So it's a little bit of a paradox. The thing that has to run by itself is also required to run in unison with thousands of other devices. And that kind of gives everybody an idea, I think, of the criticality of an individual component and the design of an overall system that could self-heal or be able to overlook or override a failed component. But it's pretty complex, and the stakes are high. I mean, if you just had one rail collision in this yard uh, every 10 years, it would be way too much because they're big events. So now I want to shift to another area of my interest, and that has to do with municipalities. So if we looked at the other types, other sectors' uses of automation, you've got a wide variety of things, but each one has its own mission. In other words, the water treatment plant runs water treatment. The offshore platform does those functions, etc. But if you look at a municipality, they probably have at least 40 or 50 functions that are automated, that are being run by a small town often. Going clockwise on this one, on the upper left-hand side, these are new water meters that will also give your utility the ability to reduce water consumptions during times like in the middle of summer in a drought, that sort of thing. We've got a wind farm here. A lot of municipalities are directly involved in electricity. So if you can imagine, they've got to tackle the one segment, that being water and wastewater, but they also have to be experts in another segment, that being electricity and electrical distribution. And then wastewater again, near and dear to our lives. Increasingly, our cities are recycling water, which some people don't even like to talk about, but that means the result of these pits go back into the inlet of the system. Lower right-hand side, emergency services, increasingly sophisticated. We vote for the funding of those systems because we know that they would be, we're better off. As example, if an ambulance or a fire truck can get to my house in half the time, I've improved my odds of survival or keeping my property or whatever. School buses, pretty big deal everywhere. Also running on a level of automation, maybe a little bit more primitive than these other items, but it still has to be automated in order to get the right bus to the right place. I've got an emergency vehicle on the lower left-hand side, which brings to mind 911 services, and here again, get the right equipment to the right place in a small amount of time. And then this bus lot. So many cities run large transportation systems that in and of itself would be a great task. So that's the city challenge. This is what I've been working with most lately in a startup to see how all of these services can be monitored, certainly monitored for cybersecurity, but also monitored for lack of availability. So here, guys, I'm sitting here in New Mexico. I'm at the top of a mountain. My mom lost her water for her household for 3 or 4 days, and it's not the first time it's happened. But the sad part about it, and from an automation standpoint, they don't know about it until she calls, and her phone was broken down. It's kind of, not to use too casually, but it's kind of a developing world scenario, sadly, but it's
That's
right
no
here in the
problem.
middle of the United States. Um, okay, no questions yet, right? So wanted to bust back a little bit, kind of give everybody after we've looked at all those scenarios, give everybody a sense of how it all fits together. This is a chart that's derived from what we call the Purdue model. Some of you people may be familiar with it, but largely it is it's an illustration of how to affect defense in depth. So the idea of defense in depth is we don't just have a firewall, and if you get through that firewall, you can find any of our stuff. It's not like that. If I get through the firewall, there may be an intrusion detection system. There's usually another firewall before I get to the crown jewels, and there may be other detection systems and different types of barriers to ensure that the most important function of whatever we're doing is taken care of. So if you look on this at the very bottom level where it says cell or area level 0, that's where the actual work's getting done. So if I'm, as an example, if I'm manufacturing automobiles, that's the level where I see robotics moving, where I see paint sprayers, um, all of those physical portions of our, the overall production. That's where we see it. If I go up one level above that, where it says process control network level 1, I'll see that we are also using programmable logic controllers. You see they're listed as PLC, and that may be wired to where the actual actuators and sensors are, or it may be increasingly common nowadays as wireless. And that is essentially the interface level between people making um, production decisions and the level above, supervisory, between that and the actual work being done. So the PLC or the RTU, those translate um, commands that are coming largely from Windows machines and make that information available at a lower level to the actual, like I say, actuators or robotic arms or the different things that are making stuff get done. So those three levels together are called the OT. And if you can imagine a large organization, um, above that are what we usually call carpeted areas, but it's IT. It's carpeted areas because it's not a plant floor or it's not a oil refinery or whatever's going on down there. So that's where there's a natural divide between the two worlds, the one of production and the other one of IT or of where the bean counters lie, right? So between those, OT and IT, we usually have a perimeter network, which can be called level 3 or 3.5. That's where we collect a lot of the computing, a lot of the aggregated information off the production floor goes up to that higher level. And there it's going to be visible to people like engineers, people who are wearing white shirts and walking on carpeted areas are going to get this kind of information, plus other things. A historian, for those who don't know, gives me all of the information about a type of, all the information about a type of physical operation down below. Example might be if I have a robotic arm and it's got several outputs in terms of information about its health and well-being. Among those is like vibration or inaccuracy, that kind of information. We want to pump it up to the historian. Ultimately, and nowadays, it'll go to the cloud. But that's an area where it can be aggregated and parsed and minimized so that it can be sent forward. And sometimes it goes directly to the manufacturer. So I worked in an automotive production facility, and they had a brand of robotics called Fanuc. You've probably seen them before. And some of that information stays local. Some of that information may go to an engineering staff for the auto company, but a whole lot of the information is going directly up to the manufacturer, which shows it presents another problem is that you've got all of these third parties they all have fingers into the overall operation. So that's an example. Another example at this level, there's a lot of Windows machines used. You may want a domain controller. Well, I have a domain controller, but I also have it isolated by a firewall from the actual operations. You can see that a firewall is a blue cloud. Actually, I could help a little bit with that. Right here, so though I have a domain controller right here, and it is giving authentication and authorization services to a bunch of Windows hosts or even Linux hosts. I've got a firewall on that side, and then I have a firewall on the other side. So before we get to the actual kind of carpeted areas, IT operations, all of these other things, a lot of this might have to do, example, would be billing or handling the inventory or the just-in-time ordering systems, those sorts of things may well ride up at this level. How are we for time?
We are still good, Brett.
Okay. So just wanted to shift there now that we have a little bit of an idea of what's going on and look over the last probably 30 or 40 years of how external, what do I want to say, nefarious attacks on our different computing areas, how that has shifted over time, increasingly to focus on infrastructure. So I know a lot of our customers have had a situation where they had to call their employees and tell their employees, don't come into work today because, something's wrong. Ransomware is an example. Something's wrong and you can't do your normal job today. So we just want you to stay home. That's bad. And if it goes on very long at all, it has an enormous financial impact. But it's a whole different thing between that and when you get a call from the city saying don't drink the water. So if any of you in high school or college studied psychology, you probably heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if you didn't, don't feel bad. It's easily Googled. But the hierarchy of needs says that at very base, I need air. I need air like every 60 seconds. If I don't get new air, I'm not going to last long. And above that's water and food and shelter. And it goes on up this hierarchy. If I don't have water, I'm not as worried about shelter, is the idea, because of that hierarchy. So as we look at these attacks, we realize a lot of these attacks are hitting lower and lower in that hierarchy, getting closer and closer to having a very direct effect on me and my household. Just wanted to look at a few of these and talk about their impact. One of the best known ones was the Colonial Pipeline, and that's back from 2021. So this was an attack not on the pipeline itself. We would expect if you have a gas pipeline, why not make a hole somewhere and set it afire? No, it's on the billing systems. So this was a ransomware attack on the billing systems, but it prevented the free flow of natural gas because everybody's in it for the money. Nobody could trust their meters. So for a time, about 5 days, Colonial Pipeline shut down. There's whole municipalities, particularly on the East Coast, who lost their gas pressure, which is not a safe thing. And all of that from a secondary effect of shutting down the billing systems. Same thing with the Honda attack. It was 3 or 4 years ago. I don't have it listed in these boxes here, but the direct system it was attacked was billing, was financials. And that was a lot easier to get into than to get into their plants. But the long-term effect of it was they had to stop production at the plants because they could not guarantee that the plant systems had not likewise been attacked by ransomware. So even though they didn't see the evidence of it, they couldn't take the chance of waiting and then having it spring out, inside of an assembly or a motor train plant or something like that. A couple of these, let me skip over to the third one. We've seen several of these water treatment plant attacks. And here again, we're talking about usually older facilities that have automation that's 40 and 50 years old. So, and they've also added remote access in the interim. Were you going to say something? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I heard somebody. So with remote access at the facility easily hacked, people can get in and start turning knobs. If I don't know what they did, and I may be worried that they, for instance, increase the amount of chemical going into the water or decrease the amount of chemical water, you have to assume the worst, which means for these municipalities getting hit, that they've got to stop water production for a time, check everywhere, have all of their customers boil water. And sometimes this is, hundreds of thousands of households. So it's a pretty big deal. We got some, if you look on the fourth one on the top, Atlanta City governmental, government ransomware attack. So this is an all-around attack, and if you'll remember the slide I showed just a little bit earlier, it probably affected multiple systems. So maybe the buses don't run, maybe the parking meter doesn't run, that sort of thing. But here again, when you get down to water, natural gas, electricity, it gets pretty serious. You've got to be able to figure it out rather quickly. Similar with Baltimore, the dam hack on the lower left-hand side left all of us shaken, but that came from an Iranian group. Um, so the question is, can they do something to make a dam either fall apart or make the rotors spin out of control, that sort of thing? But they did it on a small scale, which should give us reason for concern. Number one, if they can do it on a small scale, they can do it on a large scale, probably. But number two, they are building their dossier around systems that are so numerous in the U.S. that if they ever have a mind to, they can cause a lot of trouble over years' time. So I think in terms of water treatment facilities in the U.S., there have to be tens of thousands. I should have come with a number. Washington D.C. Police Department, similarly, a direct strike against citizen safety. I got another water treatment facility here. Here's the Weather Channel. That could have a lot of effect. And everybody watches the Weather Channel during a storm. If you had pre-recorded information, you could actually tamper with people's response. I live in Houston. Our response during a hurricane is either stay or leave, but all that based on information that we get from the TV. I think we're close to the end of this thing. Yeah, I want to leave everybody with this thought here regarding water. I've talked to Akeen a lot about water. I'm currently working with a startup that will be able to help cities to detect water leaks and other areas of inefficiency that are costing their water, costing them, the citizens there, water. This is for me, a very poignant view of the world. Those young ladies there all hauling water lived through a time probably when they got water via pipe to their house. And correspondingly, their grandmothers probably didn't. So you see this long arc, a sad arc between we have to haul our water every day in order to have water to drink and bathe, to we getting water delivered to our house or at least to our neighborhood, to once again we have to train our young girls to carry water again. It's a sad thing. I've got a list of towns here.
So,
Of
Brett, I'm kind of
Yes.
curious on the water side. What are some of those significant issues we can have from an OT point of view? So, what is a direct threat to us? Is it
Okay.
taking over the PLC and dispensing excessive chlorine, or what are some real life potential crises this could be?
All of those things you mentioned, but the very biggest is line breakage. Over 30% of the world's water intended for industry and residences and that sort of thing, 30% of that water is wasted largely by running onto the ground. So all of those things are important, better automation, better control of that. But certainly right now with these large droughts we've had, pipes break, and these little communities or big communities don't have the means to be able to discover um, where that break is in order to directly address it. So it just gets worse and worse and worse to the point
Got it.
where, yeah, I think some places, I don't know how Lagos is, but like Mexico City, they've got whole districts in Mexico City where there's no more running water. The
Hmm.
secondary effect of that is cholera, dysentery, and other waterborne illnesses that can't be controlled when the water system can't be controlled. And I made a jump forward from information security, but if you look at this in terms of automation, you see that the automated systems are going to have to be upgraded or better protected in order to protect these things that are absolutely fundamental, very low level in
Yeah.
life. And the area for that, to a large extent, is cybersecurity, because this is an example of loss of availability.
Yeah.
Just the same would be with Coca-Cola or GM or whoever
Yeah.
when their lines stop running.
Hi, Brett. We had a question. The question is,
Yeah.
someone asked, Titilope, thank you. She said, the secondary firewall, is it for redundancy, failover, or is it for load balancing?
No, I appreciate that. So at any one point, you very often will have two firewalls for redundancy and load balancing. But within that area where the we call them the lower latitudes, but that from our drawing areas, the 0, 1, and 2,
Mhm.
we may have a firewall on both sides of any critical point like that. And it's kind of a man in the middle approach. You may make it through the first firewall, but not through the second. Let me scoot back to that if I could. That's a good question. Uh, let's see. Yeah, this is very common where we've got three firewalls. One of them is really the IT firewall. It was already there before we started working on the other stuff. But here you've got a isolation between the this layer 3.5 where we've got OT functions that are still need to be um, protected from the IT world. You've got your regular IT here, which can access down here given the authentication and authorization requirements. And then you actually have a firewall between that 3 and a 5 level that protect those things below um, the what do I want to say, the human machine interface, the PCLs, PLCs, and then finally the actual sensors and actuators. So this is like the holy grail down here. We don't want to mess with it at all. We certainly don't want anybody working in there who don't have access to it, legitimate access to it. But it also, we've got to have a gateway to get the information from all of these devices into the historian and into the maintenance system, into MES, which may be ordering parts and chemicals and stuff like that, reside in here. So each section is very carefully isolated from the others. And just one more note on that, the regulatory framework that we rely on most for that is IEC 62443, which we can do an overview of that sometime
Yeah, that would
if
be great.
Skillweed wants to do it. What does that tell us to do, and how does that help us? Might be helpful to us. Is
I
there
would
another
hold
question?
you to that, Brett. I'll bring you back to do that. That'll be awesome.
Okay, sure.
All right. I have
Thank
another
you.
question, Brett.
Okay.
How would SCADA monitoring factor into IoT security?
Well, that's a good question. So the difference in most cases, the difference between SCADA operations and IIoT is that I know the source of the SCADA operations. Typically, it's something that's attached to our overall OT network. It may be attached by uh, public networks. It may be attached by wireless. There's a lot of ways that I might attach that. But if you can imagine in a pipeline situation, I've got every several miles, I have a compression station. It's got a lot of controls there, and we're getting information off of that. So it's kind of all in house. It may be difficult to manage, but we own all the elements, or else we've got good contracts with companies who do and share information with us. The IIoT thing is a whole lot different, two or three reasons. One reason, I guess the most specific reason, is that typically our company are buying services from third parties. Okay. I worked, as I said, with the Coca-Cola people for quite a while. I had no prior knowledge of their operations, but one thing that struck me from the start is about half of the work done in that plant is being done by third parties outside of the plant. So if you look any aspect of it, if you look for the carbon dioxide, the nitrogen, the certain chemicals being injected, the maintenance of the cans and bottles, are they getting scratched or bumped and all that? All those things are being handled by third parties. Now, you got to ask yourself, as I did at the start, why would they do that and give themselves such a broad attack surface, right? Because when it's just us and it's just in our building, we got pretty good control over that sort of thing. But now it's us and 25 partners, and we've got very limited visibility into that. So consequently, what we in that project actually is we beefed up the firewalls so that we could have better proxy services, and then where we can using deep packet inspection, so we know exactly what we're getting from our third party IIoT partners. So it's not that we don't trust them, but we have no idea who might have busted into their environment and could now attack ours. I don't know if that. So IoT is not really on this picture here, but this picture. By the way, this model is 30 years old. I think it was 30 years old this year. The
So
Purdue model.
Purdue is 20 years already? Oh,
Purdue, yeah. But the interesting thing is, it's really it's people say, well, it's dead or it's irrelevant anymore. It's the same thing. You've just got more sections to
yeah.
deal with. So it's still defense in depth. I don't want anybody to have a direct shot from the top layer 4 or 5 down to the bottom layer 0 without having to pass through several gateways. And accordingly, it's more expensive. If I had a small shop, we get by with one firewall. It's a whole lot cheaper than trying to manage it with multiple firewalls and a lot of tuned switches and that sort of thing. However, the alternative, carelessness, I think, is getting seen pretty
Yeah.
clearly with ransomware.
Thank you. And somebody asked if we could have the presentation available. And folks, I will
Sure.
see what we can. I'll share that with the community. And if you know how we get our sub, go to skillway.com/resources. We have tons of books there. And once Brett gives me the copy, I'll try and put it there so you guys can grab it there also. And so that's great. Any other question, folks? We try to wrap up as early as possible and leave room for questions. Questions, folks. Thank you, Titilope. Questions? All right. One more thing, Brett. Okay, somebody said, okay, this is a good one. All right, let's see. Hey, Brett, take this. So he said, throw more lights on cyber OT security best practice that enhance organizational security posture.
That enhance the organizational security posture.
Yeah, just some general. I know we do a lot of
Okay.
segmentation, for
Sure.
example. Yeah, any of those stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, yeah, if we want to look at that big question, which has to do with managing risk, right? It's important to realize that we are dealing with, if it's our responsibility, we're dealing with an area that potentially could cost a lot of money in an outage or in like product damage, or people get sick because the recipe was changed or whatever. But it needs to be, here's my number one: any kind of cybersecurity risk on an operational environment needs to be weighed against that level, usually measured in dollars, that level of risk every other place in the organization. I'll give you an example. So let's say I run a soda pop bottling line, and a day's outage costs my company $500,000. Okay. Not insignificant. Something that we're trying to avoid by having sufficient controls in place to make sure that doesn't happen. But $500,000 is a lot of money. But I want to tell you something. At the same time, somebody can make a mistake in accounting and cost $500 million. Sorry, $500,000. Maybe your CEO might say something goofy or a little bit provocative in the press. Your stock will slump. Maybe that's $500,000. So that my first bit of advice is normalize risk. Risk needs to be associated with money. Money is the only way that you can balance a non-production risk with a production risk, right? So as the budgets come out, we're going to spend so much here and so much there, but I want to know, is that commensurate with the risk? Okay, so when we have to appeal for a budget, we need to understand and have examples of similar risk in other areas of the organization in order to make sure that our management understands that they're not going to get protection for nothing. It's going to cost some money. Um, the other, oh yeah, sorry. So the next thing is, I would say you need to adhere to a framework. And here's why. Let's say you got a job with a big company, kind of a Lockheed Martin or something like that, and and you're the risk manager, and they are in all kinds of different manufacturing and design groups. Here, I want to say once again, what we want to do is we want to normalize and standardize on what's considered sufficient risk or what's considered too much risk. And the way to do that is with a framework. Most of the situations I work with, there are two or three things going on in terms of frameworks. The first is something simple like the NIST CSF, if you're familiar with that, or CSET. And then as you get more and more into architecture or network design, it's more likely that you would use something like IEC 62443. So IEC 62443 is kind of the science behind the grid you're looking at right here in terms of Purdue and defense in depth. But what are the controls at each one of those interfaces, each one of those white lines between, is being determined by largely a set of questions around what's being protected and the value of those things. That whole thing is embodied in the IEC 62443. So
Good
first
point.
thing, standardize on the way we collect and analyze risk. The second thing is to standardize on our treatment of our operational facilities, and that includes OT and IT. That we need to always be talking the same thing, right? And as I gave you two examples earlier, it was the IT system, the accounting system, or whatever that brought down the manufacturing system
Mm.
to the tune of millions of dollars. So they all need to be held in, and if you can imagine it, looked at with the same eye. My
Hey,
third,
Brett.
what's that?
Sorry, go
We're out of
ahead.
money, out of time.
No, we
Okay,
have
cool.
about 10 more minutes.
Okay.
Sorry, you had a third one you wanted to say before I
Yeah, real
actually.
quick.
Yeah.
In all of these organizations, especially over the last 10 or 15 years, the market's been so hot that it's has become increasingly difficult to attract and retain employees to work in cybersecurity. And that's largely by the fact that there's somebody just down the street who will pay them more. So all I'm going to say, guys, from all of my experience, number three is treat your team well. Let them go somewhere and train every year. Let them, if they have, let them take the time to shadow. Let them have the sense that they are working towards the next level in their own career, or let them have the sense that they can do something else, even if it's not in our best interest. We want to retain that employee. So I think that's
Thank you. Yes,
probably as big a recommendation as any.
excellent. There's a question that came, and after this, we'll just wrap up.
Okay.
Um, Titi Lopez said lots of talks around business continuity and disaster recovery plan. You know, so what's your take on that in general in OT space?
Yeah, I got two takes on that. One is that um, because we've got a lot more inputs, our possibility of having a disaster based on something beyond our control is greater than ever. So this is like I was talking about with Coca-Cola. You've got all these third-party inputs because they can do a better job of doing whatever the thing is than Coke perhaps. But the negative side of that is that's one more point of failure. So as an example, if we were managing our CO2 content in a Coca-Cola and we lose control of it, we lose visibility over it, or whatever, then we went down. So I think that we have more to look at than we ever did before. The second thing is, as we move more and more systems to the cloud, which was taboo not that long ago, we have the possibility of two things. One is to be able to restore quickly because we've got a lot of our data is being stuck in the cloud as opposed to tape. We had the possibility of just restore quickly, but we also have a problem with lost contact. Back in the day when a lot of these facilities were designed, the prime directive was it should be able to run without outside communication. And it's true to this day. A lot of manufacturing situations until they run out of inputs, until they run out of food or water or whatever the thing is that actually makes the product. They can run for days with a severed communication line. But so I guess what I'm saying is a mixed bag, certainly with the cloud, between having more things to watch, but on the other hand, having a lot better technologies to restore quickly or to have continuous availability.
Got it.
So it's a mixed
Oh,
bag.
one more question, Tab. Brett, somebody asks, what's your take in cyber OT architecture to avoid operation disruption? So, what's your take? What's an ideal architecture? I-
Well, yeah. So that's been around since forever, but uh, it's largely duplexing things at critical
Yeah.
junctures. And I'll tell you how a good start on that. If you go through, like if you've got Maximo or some kind of other means to track mechanical failures, a good way to start on that is look at what's broken before and what the
Mm,
impact was. So most big industrial systems will have, for instance, if there's one big pump, there'll be another big pump, and then
mm,
there'll be a valve between them to redirect the flow, that sort of thing. So a lot of it has to do with what's happened before in order to determine the probability of it happening again. And the second thing is, what do we have right now that is a single point of failure that would affect a lot of systems?
got
So
it.
in this picture here, if you look at the very bottom at cell area level 0, in manufacturing, that's where your manufacturing lines are. And a lot of plants, like at say Procter and Gamble or somebody like that, within the same building, they may have 10 or 15 manufacturing lines,
Mm,
which is built-in redundancy because at any given time, one of them may be down. So that's a whole area where, as long as we manage it correctly and we don't allow like ransomware to bleed from line to line to line, if we have good isolation, we're in a good position to resist shutdown in the first place. But one step beyond that is how can we quickly restore from images that were put in the cloud in order to get going.
got it. One more question, Brett. So, in terms of cloud, tell me about, tell the community about how the appetite of plants in general to deploy their legacy system or, old system to cloud. What's been the experience so far? I know we had a few of our clients that we struggle
Yeah.
with that. So share some war story around people resisting cloud or moving to different cloud. What have you seen in that space?
Yeah. So the age-old design we called air gapping, which is to say nothing there's nothing in and out of this plant that has to be there in the first place, and we don't allow for instance, in this picture, we don't allow level 3 and level 2 to intermingle stuff. That was kind of the standard for a long time. And then for the last, I don't know, 10 or 15 years, we've been trying to encourage them to put certain data sets in the cloud.
Mm.
And it's mostly all derived data. And it's also images, like in order to restore a switch or a PLC or whatever, we may have images kept in the cloud, but very little interaction between the OT levels and what's in the cloud. It's almost all outbound still, but that's changing. It's just it's hard. Here again, the prime directive was if you lose all communication, you should still be able to operate. So people have been very, very adverse to using the cloud.
Thank you. Okay. The final question, I promise the final one before we, just wrap this up, is so what do you say to somebody that is, why do you think it's important to know and understand data in the space of, you know, IT or cybersecurity in general? We have a program, we typically are encouraging our folks to learn data and to understand how to manipulate data because what's your take? Because virtually everything we do, we need to know how to manipulate those data anyway. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Um, First of all, anybody who told you 10 years ago that there'd be so much work around data and databases and data lakes and all that other stuff, right now, you probably wouldn't have believed them at the time because it would have seemed, a few years back that things were pretty well rounded up between like Oracle, SQL Server, SAP, that sort of thing, in terms of managing our data. Everything's gotten shifted.
Yeah.
The biggest thing, obviously, is stuff being moved to the cloud, which kind of makes
Yep.
sense. But down on these levels, the data is of enormous importance. A lot of it has to do with the kind of machine activity. You can see there on the fourth level up, the historian, where a lot of that data is kept, and a lot of the data has to do with has to get to engineering in order for them to make long-term uh, decisions on that. So the I'm going to say that the data aspect of manufacturing environments is really only recently uh, taken off, where they
Mm.
realize if we can get the data out of the plant, there's enormous things that we can do with it. We had a little anecdote here, but when I was a plant operator in West Texas, we were setting up a new automation system, and I told our boss, the plant boss, that we would have the capability to sending the plant data down to Houston for analysis by engineers. And he
Mm.
looked at me very sternly and he said, "Over my dead body." So I'm just going to say, generally, the attitude has been, uh,
Mm.
it stays in the plant, but
Yeah.
nobody wants to operate that anymore. And also another factor is now very often you have multiple owners of the same facility, or you have engaged engineering companies who aren't part of your city or whatever, part of your regular force,
Mm.
who want to share that data, and that can't easily be done by
Yeah.
remote control into the plant and start browsing around. Instead, it all has to be organized. It has to be set usefully, and most
Okay.
of all, it has to be protected in a way that was intended by the plant owner and the subject matter experts. So whether it's in the cloud or it's still in one of these machines, it needs to have the equivalent protection.
All right. Thank you so much, Brett. And
That's the
final one,
challenge.
somebody asked about the AI impact on cyber OT. Um, Sorry, guys, we are really late. Give a 10-second answer on this one, Brett. Haha.
Everything and nothing. So
Impacts of AI.
yeah, everything and nothing. So at those bottom three levels, uh, it's it. I haven't seen very much yet that would indicate that AI would be used exclusively in an area where engineers want everything to be so precisely.
Yep.
But
Got it.
above that level, here, levels three and up, it's exploding. There's just so
Yep.
much stuff. and
Absolutely.
it's hard to keep track of it.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And normally, before we leave, we always have our dancing. Brett is going to dance out before
All
Brett
right.
dance out. For some of you, we know we have the program coming up. We have our Cyber Deep is just a technical training for people that want to just have knowledge of tools. That's really the design to know some tools in cyber. Then we have an AI and data class kicking up tonight. Join, just learn how to use data and play with it. It will be fun. And without further ado, let me get Brett to do some boogie dance and dance out to our song. And thank you everyone for being part of this. You guys are
All right.
awesome. All right, Mr. Brett,
Okay.
let's
where
go.
leaders are born.
Let's
Embrace
go.
the
There we
tempo.
go. Let's
Let your
go.
dreams take storm.
I got
Rise
some
up,
dad
lead
old guy
us.
moves.
Let the beat
Come on,
guide
let's
your
go.
way.
I love those moves. Come
Unlock
on.
your
Huh?
potential. Seize the day. From the dance floor to the
Thank
boardroom.
you everybody for
Let your
joining. You
light
guys are
shine,
awesome. Thank you all.
shine. Skill
And
without
we're going to bring Brett
academy.
back. He's going to talk
It's
about some
your
of those
time.
frameworks specifically for the
Feel
architectural
the
side.
drums pulsating, the
62443. So we
energy
look
so
forward to that,
strong.
folks. Thank you all for being part of
Join the
it. It's
movement
midday. Before you leave,
where
please jam the
dreams
like button,
belong.
folks. And let's
From
have more people.
Lagos
Thank you so
to
much, everybody. God
Nairobi,
bless.
All right.
Thank you,
here we
Brett. You are
go.
awesome.
Skill
And
with
you stay safe
academy,
there.
You.
And we'll
break
talk soon.
down the
Take care,
walls.
everybody.
Right.
All
Rise
right.
up,
Bye.
lead us, let the beat guide your way. Unlock your potential, seize the day. From the
Thanks,
dance floor
everybody.
to the
Enjoy
boardroom,
the rest of the
let your
day.
light shine, shine. Skill with academy, it's your time. Oh, 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 feel the drums pulsating, the energy so strong. Join the movement where dreams belong. From Lagos to Nairobi, hear the call. Skillway Academy, break down the walls. In the heart of Africa, a flame ignites, a rhythm so vibrant, it sets minds alight. Skillway Academy, where leaders are born. Embrace the tempo, let your dreams take storm. Rise up, leaders, let the beat guide your way. Unlock your potential, seize the day. From the dance floor to the boardroom, let your light shine, shine. Skillway Academy, it's your time. Feel the drums pulsating, the energy so strong. Join the movement where dreams belong. From Lagos to Nairobi, hear the call. Skillway Academy, break down the walls. Rise up, leaders, let the beat guide your way. Unlock your potential, seize the day. From the dance floor to the boardroom, let your light shine, shine.